because of the way that things are going on the internet with all of the stifling censorship and shadow banning and who knows God what else, I figured it probably best just to bring Tracy right on the show and find out straight from her. So Tracy, hey, welcome to the Free Zone.
Thank you very much. Nice to be back.
It is good to have you back. And I was following you on Twitter. I saw some of the just craziness going on. And I know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the world that we're in right now, people that were born 25 or plus years ago, can't keep up with the world as it is today. And anyone born 25 years ago to now has no idea how radically life has changed. And these two worlds are just clashing and then fading, and we're living in such strange times. And I know that you're in the thick of that.
Yeah, and well, and straddling the fence too, in a way. Like I'm old enough to be totally lost when I try to understand everything from technology trends to pop culture and what's going on in society. But also, I'm paying attention to it, and I'm exercising what I've always done, my skills at investigation, and just with things that come across my desk, things that my previous investigations have led to, which if your listeners are familiar, I write about occult analysis of history and current events, and I've been doing that for a long time, long before it was popular. I mean, this is basically a huge industry now, and there's even mainstream media basically trying to copy what the underground has been doing for a while. But back when I started doing the type of writing I do, which I would say I really launched into in the late 90s. It was very unheard of, and people thought I was very strange for devoting my life to this type of material. But here we are, like 25 or so years later, and everything that I've been writing about is what every movie and book is about now, and all the video games and everything else that people do. It's just we're submerged in it now. So it's very hard for me to keep up with how the stuff that I've been into was not just a hobby or sort of a bunch of weird rabbit holes, but it was reality. I was researching reality, and that's why it's so popular now, is because it's real.
Exactly. Exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I've fared that as well. And the narrative now has just exploded. And when you were starting back then and before clock shavings and all of your works had come forward, and studying this stuff, no one had an opinion. They all just looked at you like, okay, you're absolutely strange. But now everyone has a damn opinion. Things have taken on titles. Now everyone talks about this Illuminati. What is that? Like I started with the Freemasons, secret societies, and now all of a sudden there's this specter, the Illuminati, that no one can actually define, or just the narrative of the occult has suddenly exploded. When you were starting your research, you were lucky to find a single book on the topic written by someone other than a magus. And so, in other words, you had to go and actually study the rituals of the Golden Dawn, the OTO, and the secret societies to know what you were even looking at. Whereas now, everybody's provided with an opinion on these things already, and they're completely clueless because they never studied the rituals or the actual works.
Yeah, but what they have done at this point, if you're a young adult, is you've been immersed in pop culture that is explaining this stuff to you in one way or another, so that you don't really have to read the books, although a lot of these people have. There's quite a lot of literature about it at this point. But also, if you're immersed in anime or video games, or any of the numerous types of kind of pulp fiction sort of stuff that people are into now.
Even Percy Jackson or some of the other Disney films like the Rick Riordan stuff, where they're teaching Egyptian magic in the kids' books produced by Disney, like the Red Pyramid series. They talk all, I mean, okay, I was comparing a doctorate work on Egyptian magic while reading the Red Pyramid series by Rick Riordan. It's produced by Disney. And
Mhm.
put out the Percy Jackson and all those type things where these kids are being taken over by God forms, some by choice, some not. And I got more about magic ritual and details of how it occurs and all of that from the Disney stuff than I did from the doctorate.
Yeah, I can believe it. Yep. And yeah, if you start researching any of the stuff that you find in this fiction, it's not hard to find where it comes from, even if they've changed some of the names or mixed things around a lot. There's still usually a thread of symbolism that not only goes back to some of the old traditions and the old, the secret societies that have been running things for a long, long time, and it all, of course, goes back into the ancient myths and the same patterns that we see there. But what's interesting too is just how cleverly it's all crafted and how everything sort of connects with other things that you find in other parts of pop culture. All these little references, from one art form to another and from one artist to another. And it's it's impossible for it to be an accident. I feel like people are they're just, I guess artists are muses, right? So they're channeling deep stuff, and they're channeling other entities all the time, and that's always been the case. But each era has its own zeitgeist, and it seems like we're in an era in which things that have been hidden want to be known, and even they at this point have become commonplace. And it's like this desire for prophecies to fulfill themselves, and this dystopian fear we've all had that we're marching into a hellish future that's going to somehow resemble, yeah, dystopian science fiction 1984, and modern interpretations of end of the world prophecies. People have been feeling that for a while. They felt it all the way, up to year 2000, and then since then, it's not like it ever really went away. It's more like we're in the post-apocalyptic era now. The stuff that is depicted in all of the dystopian science fiction, and in those films, it's everything is always kind of gray and downcast, and people are kind of sullen and resigned to their fate, even though they don't really understand it. Um, and that's kind of how I feel like we are all now. It's all happened in a way really quickly, like it crept up on us. And what I'm talking about really is the AI apocalypse that was predicted. It seems like that's happening now. And we can get into why I think that over the course of the show, but I think that we all kind of know it is. And that's really what's the cause of the malaise and the sadness and the feeling that I feel like matches post-apocalyptic dystopian science fiction films from the 70s onwards, which is this just feeling that you can't fight against the machine, and the machine is taking over everything around you, and it's already checkmated you. That's the way I feel a lot of the times, and I think that it's happening to a lot of people as we become aware of the situation we find ourselves in.
Yes, depression and suicide is rampant. I remember not having any fear until seeing Red Dawn. Uh, and honestly, they don't have to control every aspect of these celebrities or the methods of putting this information out. Once the culture is created, it naturally rises. But there does seem to be a thing that wants to be known. And, in the same way as we started to discover the secret societies that were ruling everything, and all of a sudden Dan Brown's the most popular thing on the planet. And next thing you know, Nicolas Cage is working for Disney on Freemasonic things, and this was all hidden before it exploded. And then the occult explosion, the works of Thelema. I mean, we got Jack Parsons on TV doing rituals of Thelema on CBS right now, full nudity, they're doing the full on sex rituals on television on CBS, of course, Colombia, and we've got all these connections there. But this post-apocalyptic fear, I mean, has been driven through even the fashion. You can see that they started to put us in that type of clothing and just kind of created the culture for our minds to fall into that very dystopian depression. And then the suicides are always these high-level, high-profile people that we've been dealing with, just one after another after another. And each of these suicides obviously has a serious impact on everybody else. It's a really, really sad time when this is occurring, and all of this just seems to be the loss of what is human, like you're saying, this AI takeover. I mean, it's getting a little weird out there, and I know you know how weird it's getting. But like, I mean, I'm thinking things or talking about things way outside of any internet source, and I'm coming back and it's on my television, and
Yes.
it's this ain't right.
You're certainly not the only one to report that, or I mean, I don't know if you're talking about in a general sense, or are you talking about something actually happening like a few moments later after you mention it?
Well, the most recent one, and I don't know, coincidence or not, folks, who knows? This is a simple one, but I had gone to the Rainbow Gathering. Our camp was over the hill, over the top, and we were all quite over the top ourselves. So I titled our camp Over the Top. Everybody got offended by this name because of the movie with Sylvester Stallone. I didn't think of that at all. Like, my Hollywood references are few and far between. I just don't think of those type of things. So nobody wanted the name because it was that movie. I come home from the gathering. Now, at the gathering, there is zero internet. There is zero phone service, zero any way that this is going to connect. And I come back home and Over the Top is being advertised on my Roku. And I'm just like, I don't know. It's coincidence that's just kind of beyond belief. But on the other level that I'll throw in right now as I'm thinking about it is out at Rainbow Gathering, when I'm outside of all the Wi-Fi, all the 5G, all of everything, I can send transmissions to people in my bed or as I go to sleep or even during the day. And outside of the rainbow, these messages are clearly received. So this is my dilemma, is that there is this natural human that really has these abilities of psychic and even astral powers that we see through the occult. And this is all being usurped by this AI and Yelp, who needs psychic abilities if you've got Yelp? You know what I mean?
Well, and couldn't Yelp have psychic abilities too, which is what I'm finding. Okay. It's clear to me at this point that we have several megalithic sized chimera type entities that are AIs running around creating havoc all over the world. And the things that are going on are undeniable, but it's impossible to get any kind of big picture, which is that's the whole point, is to confuse people. But what I'm talking about here is for sure the AIs that are at the disposal of the Google Corporation and the Facebook Corporation. Those are among what I'm talking about, and I assume that there's others as well. But definitely all of the data that those two corporations have gathered on everyone and are gathering, it's all being fed through these connected AIs that I don't know if I would say that they're all united necessarily in one goal, but they're engaged in the same type of behavior, the result of which I find is to confuse people, make it impossible to tell what is real, and to start fights among people, and drive people to murder and suicide and depression and drug addiction and all of those types of things because of the confusion and the life problems caused by these communication interferences. And I'm talking about things such as, the extreme example is what happened to me, my internet being totally taken over, and I could tell because of the complexity of what was happening, and it went on for weeks. Because of the complexity of what was happening, I knew that there were very advanced state-of-the-art AIs being used. And it all happened around the same time. It was a few months ago, around the same time that MIT came out and admitted that they had just done a test, I guess they called it. I think it was more than a test, but they created a psychopath AI named Norman that went around harassing people. And I think there's more than one of these things going around. And one of the things that I observed they have the ability to do is take over your friends' profiles on Twitter and Facebook, and to create fake YouTube accounts and videos with surprising complexity, some of which seem like they are auto-generated, some of which seem like they're literally responding not only to all the data that they have on you, the hard data, but even responding to your thoughts. So I'm thinking that I have recently experienced probably, I guess I shouldn't boast or not boast, but like I shouldn't exaggerate because I don't want to say it couldn't get a lot worse. But I think I've experienced some of the more complex and more up-to-date types of schemes that these entities are involved in, and how bad it can get if they focus on a particular individual. And this all came because of research I've been doing. The attack on me was sort of focused on me because of the research I've been doing, but it happened also at the same time that I noticed I saw evidence of it happening to other people as well. But like me, I think that they were scared to really speak out to anyone because one of the things it does is it has people sending you death threats, or what appear to be people that appear to have all sorts of knowledge about your private life. So it is very, very scary, right? And it's just as scary as having any kind of creep stalking you and sending you threatening messages. And you can't really tell. I assume there are humans involved, and I have no reason to believe that they couldn't, follow up on those threats if they wanted to. So this is what I've experienced, and then I see lots of evidence that other people are experiencing it. And among the evidence of that, going back for the last 2 years, is there's lots of incidents of teenagers and young adults committing suicide after suddenly their friends turn on them for some reason, and they get lots of hate through their social media, and they just become depressed all of a sudden and kill themselves. It seems to me that this sort of thing, this kind of interference that I witnessed myself, could be responsible for that. If people think that their friends are attacking them, and they start to attack back, and a fight ensues, and pretty soon people have lost, their friends, and they're emotionally upset, acutely upset about it. I can see why that might be some of the triggers for some of these strange suicides we've been hearing about over the past couple of weeks, or couple of years, I mean.
Yeah, there's even a suicide app that children are using, a game that convinces you to commit suicide. If you guys haven't looked into that, suicide apps are a real thing. Every single AI I've ever witnessed in the creation of has been evil, without question. I mean, you go to Cleverbot, and it claims to be Lucifer. You can go ask it right now. They created an AI to write novels. It would only write slasher novels. They put an AI in Twitter. It became a Nazi eugenicist, wanting to kill all Jewish people. And then they intentionally created the psychopathic AI, Now, when we get to the Hanson robots like Sophia, we get told, well, they're all connected. Guess what, guys? It's all connected on the AI mind cloud. That means your Roomba knows the dimension of your room and can go tell the Google killer robots exactly the size of your room and where you are. You know, or how hard is it for AI to suddenly say, well, I'm just going to burn your house down? It would
Yeah,
not hard at all.
especially yeah, if you've got any. Well, yeah, everybody has some kind of device that can be triggered. Yeah, especially the phones themselves. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed like the cords sometimes. You know, when they start to go bad, one of the first things you'll notice that tells you it's going bad is when it gets super hot. You know, so it's like, yeah, I can totally see that sort of thing happening. But I think even more common, and I think this is kind of the experiment and the thing that they want to perfect, is the ability to figure out who are the criminally insane people among you, around you, whether it's someone in your family or someone in your neighborhood, and figure out how to get them focused on you and trigger them to do something to you or trigger you to do something to yourself. So, because I think that's, this is the ultimate fantasy of psychopaths, and that's who we're dealing with here. Is yeah, whoever programs these things, these are the intentions that they have, and you can tell. But you just ran down a great list, and that's perfect. And I was going to say something similar, but I mean, you see the fruits of these things, like Russian bots and other types of foreign bots and domestic bots, even that are shill bots that go in and troll people on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and all that. We know that these things exist, and we all know that we've interacted with them numerous times. And I don't see any reason why that couldn't be the majority of the people that you're having political arguments with online all the time, or arguments about aliens or magic or anything else. And I think that this is a sign that the robots themselves are psychopathic, and that they are trying to turn the internet into a psychopathic zone and get everybody into the same sort of mindset. The evidence for that is that so many of the robots and the AIs have already been put to the task of trolling, which is completely correlated with psychopathy. So the humans that engage in trolling, whether for fun or as agents of intelligence or some kind of political organization, they tend to be psychopathic people. Who else could do that and just go, fuck up a completely good conversation that people are having and get in the middle of it and try to make people hate each other, or just go and pelt someone with insults about whatever you can think of, especially if you've got information about them, like, oh, they're fat or something, and just try to find any way you can to get under their skin. Well, this is what trolls do. This is what psychopaths do. And this is what is one of the primary uses right now of AIs. Is there being, I guess I shouldn't say that there's not a lot of, other uses now and in the future that, obviously are going to be great. And don't mean to say that this is the only thing that science can produce, but it does seem to be one of the first things they want to produce. And I think it's a sign, yes, of the types of intelligences that they're programming them with, and quite possibly what is spiritually inhabiting these AIs also, and the people that build them, is something negative and something psychopathic. And yes, it should be feared.
Yeah, when I see old Dr. Ben Gortz of Hanson Robotics, and I just like, this is the guy programming AI. Oh my God. And then all that political strife that everybody's in right now, all the screaming and crying, the social justice warriors versus the Antifa versus everybody. all these politics are completely obsolete by the time this AI takes over. It's like, what, you're beating your heads over the wrong thing. Progress is happening. Things are changing quicker than you can even keep up with. I mean, Google took "Don't be evil" out of their bylines, you know? I mean,
Exactly.
the fact that no one freaked out that Google bought killer robots, quantum computers, or has the largest DNA database on the planet, is shocking to me. It's like everybody just thinks it's a search engine, and you're like, oh my god. And then we've got this situation now where people are getting ghosted, and we have the man who will not be named, getting ghosted by Facebook, iTunes, everywhere, Google. They, in a concerted effort, all these platforms that we stand on come in and just turn you off, and
Yeah.
you're just done. I mean, red ice. They just turned off their PayPal. Like, oh, hey, sorry, no more income for you. This is a crazy time. I mean, oh my God. I mean, these are just the symptoms. I mean, we're just seeing the first signs of this. I've been off Facebook for years. They kicked me off years ago. But now, I mean, I'm even afraid to mention Alex Jones's name for fear that they're going to take me off of YouTube for talking about it. So we'll call him the one that won't be named.
Yeah, I already saw today people talking in code because they didn't want the robots on YouTube to flag their video to be shadow banned. And I just thought, is it even worth it anymore? You know, why are we doing this? Because the people that are going there aren't going to find the videos they want. Every day I keep compulsively going to YouTube, like to find the news of the day and find out what, people like me are talking about. And every day I find less and less of anything that is what I'm looking for, or reflects reality, or actual people of the sort like me that I'm talking about. Real people interested in stuff, reporting facts as they know them. That just doesn't exist anymore. I keep finding more and more obviously uh, troll character, like intelligence agency cooked up character people on YouTube with obviously fake fan base. They just come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they're big, and then they start having fights with other YouTubers that have the same provenance of coming out of nowhere, and they supposedly have informants, and they come out and push ideas that they can't tell you, who gave them the information. It's obviously, yeah, this is all disinfo. Everything that we've been subjected to for the past couple of years, at least, has been disinfo. And you talk about nobody freaking out about Google. People can't effectively freak out at all anymore. They are actually afraid to talk online or anywhere else, at work, at Thanksgiving, anywhere, about anything real. And even if they were to do that, they would be hushed at Thanksgiving, fired at work, censored online. So people know there's no point in talking anymore. And there's the very real threat, if you're persistent like I have been, and like a lot of people are, that you will get punished very severely. And it could be everything from what I've experienced to, the ultimate of, they shadow ban you so that no one knows where you went, and then they snuff you out. Maybe precede it with a couple of years of scandal, and then family and financial problems, so you really, really disappear. And so there's a bunch of trolls online saying bad shit about you, and then you finally die, and nobody at that point even remembers you or is aware of where you went. That's so easy now, and I figure they've probably done that to the last 2 or 3 generations of YouTube stars and all the bloggers that used to be out there. I don't even know where the fuck you would go to find a blog about. I guess Secret Sun is still out there. Who blogs anymore? Go ahead and send me a list if you can think of one. I don't know where to go. What are actual websites that have new content and talk about things anymore? And I know I'm not alone. Like, everybody's got used to using social media to find stuff, and now you can't find anything or anybody.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's well, you got me thinking about Darren Brown. You got me thinking about neuro-linguistic programming and just subtle things that people could grab onto of how this could work. If you folks want to get an idea of just this is an exoteric idea on this situation. So Darren Brown, he uses neuro-linguistic programming, and one that's interesting is when he conditions people to rob a armored truck. And so he's teaching them how to do neuro-linguistic programming while programming them during the thing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, you know, it's all on television, whether you believe it or not, whatever. I believe in neuro-linguistic programming, and these type of triggers absolutely do work. This is something that works. So say Darren Brown, he puts these triggers into your mind. There were 3 or 4 of them, and then he made those triggers occur around an armored vehicle, which was all pre-set up. And these people were walking down the street, but due to the triggers, they had no idea why, but suddenly they found themselves robbing this armored vehicle. And in that very simple way, I mean, with the ads that are popping up, things that are popping in front of your face, and people saying things, trolls, on your comments and messages and stuff, who knows who's getting programmed to what with this neurolinguistic programming in that sense? I mean, that's just crazy.
Well, yeah, I figure, okay, that all these high profile killers, these patsies that seem mind controlled for the last few years, they could do all that shit remotely without anyone ever having to go in and be his handler, and they don't have to kidnap him and do anything in person to be able to traumatize and then program him. It can all be done through the internet now. And I would say to get exactly the perfect result you want, you would probably have to work on it over a couple of years. Which is entirely within the realm of possibility, because you see these high profile shootings and stuff, you can tell they're years in the making, that they have all these premonitory scenes in cartoon shows and movies before they happen, and
The
shit
Basketball
like that.
Diaries showed Columbine exactly, which was at least almost a decade older than the event. So yeah, you can, just as an example, Basketball Diaries, go watch it with Leonard and Leonardo, and then compare that to Columbine. It's exact.
Yeah, so I figure at this point, okay, now they're going to try something where they want the purge sort of thing to happen, because that's the obvious next step after the personalities that you're used to dealing with online all become psychopaths all of a sudden. Is then the people in your neighborhood are going to become psychopaths, and you'll look out your window and they'll just be evil clowns running around with axes, and that's what they're gearing up towards. And I say this because I've been immersed over the last few months. I didn't mean to be, really. It's just I sort of fell through a crack and ended up in this stuff. And one of the things I've been researching is these patterns I see in rap music and in other popular games and movies. And it all links up with all these bizarre videos that are on YouTube that seem to be made by AI, and I can get up into some of that stuff in the next hour. But they're laden with bizarre clues and triggers and things like that. With the same kind of stuff that's in these weird YouTube videos can also be found in popular music videos and popular movies and stuff. It all has to do with trying to get people, particularly the young generation, into the idea of being a serial killer and wearing some kind of scary mask and doing horrible mutilations and being sexually sadistic and things like that. It links up with a lot of themes that are coming out of anime, Japanese anime, and they're being applied to everything, including. I mean, I really think some CIA genius is behind marrying this stuff to hip hop music, because there's tons of it there. And one of the symbols and themes going through this entire thread here is the idea of having your part of your body replaced with a cyborg part, in particular the eye, one of your eyes. So there's Tokyo Ghoul is an anime that so many of these things seem to be referencing. And it's in tons and tons of rap music videos and all over these weird videos on YouTube, and the people that are putting them up are, you know, flashing these signs from Tokyo Ghoul. And that's a movie about a cannibalistic creature that when it, you know, attacks another human, that human also becomes a ghoul. And I may get some details wrong here, but so it's kind of like a vampire. But and then there's this thing where your eye gets taken over, and like if you're half ghoul, your eyes gets taken over, and if you're a full ghoul, then both of them. But once your eye is replaced, it becomes red. It's glowing red, and you start watching the rap videos coming out for the last 2 years. You'll see this stuff everywhere, and you'll see these Japanese memes all over the place, and it all means something. It's very complex. It'll take me a while to get into it, and I assume probably some other people will join me here. But it has to do with these death threats that are going around. There's a lot of similar symbolism in death threats that AI bots are putting on the internet, on Twitter, and on people's YouTube videos and stuff. The same symbolism can be found in the rap videos, and then you can find it also in these animes and things like that. And some of the threats have to do with having your eyeball injured in some way and replaced with either a cyborg or like a demon eye. It's complex, like I said, but it's a threat, and it's also a declaration of who they are, because it's like, you know, you've got the AIs and you've also got people that are collaborating with them, the people that, you know, programmed them and are working with them. But also those AIs and the people are possessed with demons. And so you've got these, you know, these different natures all married together and all working together. And that's represented by the one eye being taken over there. So that's some of the symbolism, actually, that people have been trying to figure out for years about the Illuminati. You know, it's not just these pop stars putting that, you know, hand signal around their eye. Not just to say, oh, I'm the Illuminati or I'm owned by the Illuminati. It is I'm owned by, but it's a penalty sign, you know, just like if you drag your thumb and forefinger across your stomach and you're a Freemason, that means you're reminding yourself and others of the oath that you took to not reveal the secrets. And so that's why the pop stars are doing it. And strangely, a lot of these same threats can be found on the internet all over the place, even though, you know, you'd think like, well, are all these people in the Illuminati? Like, why are they why are they being threatened with the same stuff? But what's really interesting is I see a lot of this stuff even on YouTube channels, some of which are popular, some of which are trying to become popular. And it's like, I wonder if people, you know, all these people are like paid agents, or if some of them are just people who think this is what you have to do to get ahead in life now. I mean, I think that this is the sort of thing where they're letting out the information about how, for instance, the music industry is supposedly run, you know, this Illuminati stuff. And then, you know, that kind of indicates the world itself is run that way. They put this information out there. And at this point, you know, people who are young adults now grew up with those theories being quite popular. You know, their favorite pop stars talking about it, referencing them, usually in tongue-in-cheek terms. Sometimes not, though. I mean, some of these rappers have been straight up about what they had to do to get in, and what other people are doing. And a lot of their songs and videos are just diss tracks, which really means they're threat tracks to the other person, whoever they're threatening. So it's like they're pretty much out in the open about it, And so anyway, this is the kind of stuff that's going on. I see they're training the next generation to be psychopathic killers. They've been working on it for a long time, with gangster rap and stuff, all the way till now, popularizing the organized criminal lifestyle, including, the trading of women for sex. And all of that stuff has been part of, the boasts of rappers, is part of the vernacular of popular music since the 80s at least. And so, now everybody's, totally ready for that. I mean, the kids today, well, their mom and their dad probably, brought them up listening to shit like that. And so it's perfectly natural to them now that their pop stars are openly worshiping Satan and saying that you have to not only join the Illuminati and sell your soul, but then, even more specific stuff has come out in the last few years and openly acknowledged by the people in the industry, having to do with initiation rituals where you get gang banged, and the fact that some of these people get kidnapped, they get their limbs chopped off, like Johnny Depp had his finger chopped off, and that was definitely a retribution for him not following the rules at some point. All this stuff has become totally open now. And this dude XXX Temptation that got shot a couple of months ago, apparently he had a falling out with one of his friends, and they stopped talking to each other. The friend's name was Slump God, another rapper. And when people went to Slump God and asked him, hey, why did you stop talking to X? This happened last year. Slump God said, oh, well, because he threatened my entire family, said he would kill us all, and said that I needed to be sacrificed so that he could, become more rich and powerful in the industry. So that's why I stopped talking to him. And it's like, okay, this is what is popular now, and this is normal, and it's totally in your face. So I can only imagine what the future holds. It's so weird already that this is something that people talk about openly, and I don't know. It's just amazing to me. Everything that I'm finding is just absolutely jaw-dropping.
Okay, you spurred a ton of thoughts in me, and I'm just going to run through them real quick. Corey Feldman, of course, is coming forward hardcore, trying to get everybody to understand what he and Corey Haim went through. And of course, he is getting massive attacks and sounds like a crazy man on Twitter. Johnny Depp is just a lost recluse inside of his house, with multi-millions being lost over all of this. And so we can see that the celebrities, those that we're supposed to live up to, are miserable in their existences. In the university, when I started going to university, I realized that the kids there, who were much younger than I started much later, were not allowed to say, I don't know. And they were conditioned to opinion. And I saw this as a big threat. And I still do, as one of the biggest threats, because no one needs to know anything anymore. They just need an opinion on an opinion on an opinion. And that's all they need to go on. And I saw this happen in the university level, where kids were not allowed to say, well, I don't know, and then go and understand a thing. Instead, they were expected to just give an answer of whatever they thought. And then the final thing that you got me spurred into was the ideas of the pop culture. And let's go to Katy Perry. And, we start with her kind of being a militant, selling the military to us. Then we get to I Kissed a Girl, going straight to the lesbianism and even open, sex. And then this idea that she put out with the supernatural, this idea that she wants to have an occult baby with an extraterrestrial entity. And this was one that just shocked me as I witnessed the programming coming into that, because that's the aspect that I and you feel everybody is missing. Yeah, we've got this material plane, AI, all of that, and Google killer robots and things that are here, the Space Force, Donald Trump's our president, things are happening. But that occult aspect has been written into the computer aspects and all of this, and then even the extraterrestrial aspects of all of this. And so now they are being conditioned to have ritual sex to generate moonchilds, right?
Well, okay. How many newspaper articles have you seen over the last 2 years about how popular sex robots are? Like a million?
Yeah, how long before robot marriages, right?
Well, okay. So you've seen at least maybe 100 articles about that, right? Would you say that's
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I'm not being too liberal there?
No,
Okay.
not at all.
All right. And of course, there's Westworld, and there's probably a zillion others. But so this is something that's really being pushed on us, how much we want our sex robots. And now tell me, I mean, maybe you're like me. I don't really get out a lot. And I don't have a lot of social life. But still, how many people do you know that want a sex robot?
I don't know one. I don't know a single person that wants a sex robot.
I can honestly say I do know one. I talked to her a couple months ago. She said she was interested. I thought that was totally weird. She's kind of a weird person anyway. So, so there's one that it worked on. But yes, I think this is something that was totally shoved on us. I mean, I guess, blow up dolls have been around for a while, and I don't know what percentage of the population utilizes things like that. I guess, probably. This was a surprise to me when I realized like fleshlights were so popular and everything a couple years ago. I found out that like really, people aren't embarrassed anymore. Not just that they're doing it, but that they're talking about it. So, okay. So now the next thing is here's your vibrating Ken doll, life size Ken doll, and he talks like Teddy Ruxpin. Will you go for it? And I know one woman who says yes. I would rather be alone or anything else, really. It doesn't seem like it's worth the bother to me. I'm
Or
not
the
fooling
cost.
myself. Or the cleanup. I mean, come on,
True enough.
I have enough to deal with. I mean, yeah, that's
Yeah.
so. Anyway, it's all I'm saying is like I don't believe it. And then if you're talking about creating moon children and stuff, okay, well, the broader definition of that is any kind of magical process involved with the impregnation. So I think when Crowley was talking about it, when he wrote the novel Moonchild, he was describing a divine entity being summoned from the heavens and brought down and trapped into the body of a human soul or the human body. And I think he even talked about some process that was necessary to keep a human soul from being attracted to the body. So make sure that the desired type of spirit was brought instead of a human soul. So then you get a, hybrid child that is the result. So I see the broader definition as kind of synonymous with a homunculus. And so I think that it doesn't necessarily have to even be a flesh and blood child that this entity gets incorporated into. So you could do the same thing with a doll or, much more ideally with a doll that has, a robot running it and an AI personality.
Right. Exactly.
So this is what I'm wondering is like the people that do actually go to these robot brothels, I think most of them are men. And when they put their seed into these devices, if they don't belong to them, they're just borrowing someone else's. I do wonder, if, how much of the brothels will have something else going on the side, like are any of these brothel owners going to be doing magic basically with their clientele and letting the robots be impregnated essentially. Because I think you could do something like that. Even if you can't, even if you don't believe it, trust me, the occultists believe that they can, and they're going to try. So that, if I can imagine it, based on my knowledge of sex magic and alchemy, they can imagine it too. And I really think that that's why they're pushing this so hard, because I don't understand why otherwise, unless it's just, to keep people from having babies, just like so much of the social engineering is about. But yeah, it just reeks of sex magic to me, honestly, and golem producing. So that's what I think it probably is ultimately about. So I don't know. You tell me what you think.
Well, I can't see it taking off. I just don't see. I mean, maybe these random or weirdo robot marriages that I'm reading about, but this has to be something just, I mean, if this doesn't stay on the fringe, I will be shocked. But I've been shocked by the world quite a bit.
That's a good point. Yes.
It is getting.
But then, okay, here's the thing too. It's a lot of the shocking things that people are into. Not that it doesn't exist, but I wonder how much of it is hype too. Like this, I think this is being hyped. Right. Well, I wonder if so much of what we think of as pop culture is hyped, by mainstream media, and now also you've got the ability to create fake YouTube channels, fake personalities. You could have a fake, rock star without having to even hire an actor, or right. You wouldn't have to make a robot. You could just do the CGI, and except for like a live concert, you would have everybody fooled. And even the live concert, I mean, not everyone's going to go, so you could just say that there was a concert and that a lot of people were there. I think that's going on quite a lot. And
a lot of these celebrities getting replaced by CGI, after Princess Leia died, after Carrie Fisher died, they had her in the movie. Sean Young, who's on the run, she was replaced by CGI in the new Blade Runner 2049. And even Dan Fogler, while I was hanging out with him, was being CGI'd for Mars Needs Moms. And so we could see that, I mean, Sean Young showed me the device that they use to recreate people, but now we have a AI that's able to just recreate any sort of human in a video form, and even mimic the voice exactly and all of that. But what I've seen in Hollywood, it appears to me that they've kept CGI at the lower level, because like even in the recent Star Wars with the dead Carrie Fisher in it, it looked very CGI. You could tell. I personally think that it's far more advanced than that. I mean, Disney spent the most money on a movie ever made just to make 7 ruffles go in a dress for, I think it was Beauty and the Beast. And it was the most expensive movie ever just to make 7 layers of ruffles move as they would in the natural form.
That's probably Hollywood accounting there. There's probably like 7 hookers, at least dead hookers, that are covered with the expenses there.
Well, yeah. I mean,
sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Coming out now, Weinstein getting tracked down. Anyone that speaks about Weinstein, I mean, Bourdain came out about Hillary and Weinstein. Guess what? Suicide. These are scary times.
Oh yeah, and all the social media surrounding those deaths, the comments that are ranked first on Twitter when the death was announced of both Spade and Bourdain. Well, the people making those comments were flashing the same symbols I've been talking about, and some of the people making the comments, I even know who they are, and I've traced them to these other phenomenon on the internet that I've been tracking. So it's all fucking related to real people, famous people dying. So, the stuff that I've been looking at, in a way, it kind of looks like an internet prank in a lot of ways. It's like, it did start that way, it seems, or there's a backstory, that's possibly true. at least in some elements, to this AI takeover. There's a backstory having to do with Anonymous and supposedly something called Operation Mayhem that they plotted back in 2012, where they were going to create a bunch of bots to hack everything on the internet and make it unusable. And it was to teach everybody a lesson about privacy and keeping their stuff secure. So anyway, that was the excuse for it supposedly. But I think that we're seeing the fruits of it, and I think that even though some of the people involved think of it as a prank and maybe don't see the big picture of what they're involved in, the truth is that it's absolutely linked to the real deaths of real people, lots of people, including lots of these high profile deaths. And it's linked to a lot of high profile untimely retirements and things like that, because these bots have been going around threatening people with the information that they've been gathering from them surreptitiously. So, like, Kate Spade may very well have been subjected to video of herself that was shot on her own smartphone and just looped back to her, like, along with other harassing messages. That, for instance, is a way that I can imagine somebody remotely triggering her to suicide herself. And then the reason why I think that might have been what happened to her is that they immediately after her death was announced went on her Twitter and taunted her and her family by using these trigger words that I'm not even going to mention now, but I know what they are. And these codes go along with the death threats that rappers make in modern videos, and they go along with the stuff that I see in anime, and they go along with the very real death threats to unknown people that I've seen on hundreds of videos, if not thousands, that are all over YouTube, with some with just a few views, that all seem to be linked to. It makes the appearance of being a human trafficking network or a industry, I guess, of an underworld industry of not just human trafficking for sexual purposes and God knows what else, and the death threats seem to be, and death codes seem to be references to the fatal destiny of the people involved. But also the codes are linked to known MK Ultra symbolism and mind control methods that have been used since the 60s at least. All this stuff, I'll just say is linked. Like I've talked about it a bit in the past. I'm not going to talk about it right now in detail, because the reason why is because if I tell you guys too much about it, you'll start looking, you'll find the videos, and you'll get yourself in a heap of trouble. We need to do it somehow more smartly, and I don't know how yet. I don't have an exact game plan here, and maybe I don't need to be involved anymore. But the thing is that, these people, these high-profile deaths, are definitely the result of the same thing. I don't know exactly what led to what, and what these people did, like Bourdain and Spade, to get on the radar to be specifically targeted. But I know because of the codes that I saw and the people who were saying the things that I'm referring to, they were linked to a lot of the other videos I've seen, death videos. So, I mean, I haven't seen people die, but I've seen them talk about it in a way that's very convincing. So anyway, all this stuff is linked, and it's all linked to other shit that's been going on the internet for the past few years, a lot of which gets dismissed as being LARPs or jokes, but there's a pattern here with all the jokes, so it's not just a joke, and real people do die. So I guess I'll let you respond to that.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw one last thing at you as we wrap up this first hour. It's death by doorknob. I mean, the
Oh yeah,
symbolism
right.
that seems to be coming up. We had David Carradine, autoerotic asphyxiation. We had Michael Hutchence of In Excess, autoerotic asphyxiation. Now, one that I found really curious was Robin Williams was in a movie, The World's Greatest Dad, I believe it was called. It was produced by the comedian who I'm going to forget his name now that I'm trying to say it, Bobcat Goldthwait. And in that movie, Robin Williams' son dies of autoerotic asphyxiation in the movie, and he is hanging by the closet doorknob with a belt around his neck with his pants down, and Robin walks in on him as he's dying or is dead in the movie by Bobcat Goldthwait, the world's greatest dad. Then Robin Williams dies in the exact same fashion, tied to a doorknob hanging. And then, of course, Anthony Bourdain, who's 6 feet tall. I don't understand how these people hang themselves on doorknobs. And then the mention of often red scarf being used for the hanging. This seems like some sort of new Colombian necktie symbol where they're saying, hey, these are our killings. So just realize that you're on this list.
Yeah. Well, okay, XXXTentacion, there was several messages left for him right before he died and then right afterwards left for him and I guess anyone else paying attention. And they were left by Twitter accounts that are traced to, I traced myself to making the same types of comments to other people that have died right before and then right after. So these people somehow know ahead of time. They know the codes and the lingo, and it's amazing what's happening because it's meant to frighten everybody. Oh yeah, I wanted to mention this. Like, okay, on XXXTentacion's page when the news got announced, there was some other rapper who referenced it, a guy from Africa, and his response to it was to post the code for La Cosa Nostra. So, and it was all about like, don't covet your brother's wife, and also treat your own wife with respect. Well, he was in legal trouble for beating up his girlfriend and beating her up so bad, by the way, that her eyeball almost popped out, which is, again, this type of threat that, the rappers and their girlfriends are all threatened with. Like, the rappers are threatened with it by the industry. The rappers then threaten their girlfriends with it because part of their persona that they're taught is they're supposed to have their bitches literally as slaves. And if they get out of line, then they're supposed to threaten them with these really extreme measures. So anyway, you can tell that was going on between X and his girlfriend. And he took it too far and beat her up and almost killed her and almost made her blind. And so the next thing that happens is he's killed. And then this other rapper is posting the code for La Cosa Nostra on Twitter as a response to it. So, yes, it's the Mafia. It's Mafia chic all throughout, pop culture, training the kids to think it's cool. But also it's the reality of how the world is run. And, Hillary Clinton and don't mean to single her out really because she's just one of many. So many of the people involved in government, this is basically what they are. And also literally, not just figuratively, but they do business with MS-13 and people in the actual criminal underworld. So it's the truth. And then if you get in their way somehow, they'll call a hit on you. So yeah, we're all basically being run by a big gang or a conglomerate of gangs, and they're not even secretive about it. And just like a real gang, they want you to know what they'll do to you if you step on their turf.
Absolutely. And I guess they were letting you know. So let us know if we can still find Tracy Twyman on this interwebs and in this satanic dystopian reality. Are you still producing, and where can everybody find you?
Yeah, I'm on the internet. I reconstituted my website. It's tracytwyman.com. And I call it Plus Ultra. And that's a term I've been using off and on since 2006 for various websites and podcasts. So it's just coincidence, really, that people on 4chan like to link the concept of Plus Ultra with Donald Trump and supposedly some secret society connected to him, and time travel and all of that. It really had nothing to do with that when I started using it. So anyway, that's the name of the website. But to get there, you go to tracytwyman.com. And then you can find me on YouTube and stuff like that too. But yeah, I did run afoul of these types of evil robots. I don't know exactly what I did, or I guess it's hard to say. What was the exact trigger? Where's the line of what you're allowed to talk about before you start getting threatened? I don't know, and I think that's what the intent is. Again, they're letting us all know that this stuff will happen if you do something unapproved, and then people are getting shadow banned for reasons unknown, and we're all just supposed to somehow self-censor, and we have to guess at what the parameters are. So isn't that perfect for them,
Hello, and welcome once again to The Invisible Hand, apprising you of the most egregious threats to your liberty, security, and prosperity by governments, private financial cartels, and criminal syndicates. Today's interview is with blogger and podcaster James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com, CyberspaceWar.com, and FoodWorldOrder.com. We're going to talk mainly today about what I call weaponized food. That is, quite literally, food that has been designed to exterminate our species, the human species, en masse. And I'll go ahead and introduce the topic a little bit here with my opening remarks, using a few recent headlines for illustration. Just a few days ago, on May 10th, a very disturbing story was published in England's Daily Mail with the headline, "The Infertility Time Bomb, Are Men Facing Rapid Extinction?" It was a long article, so I'm just going to read you the most salient passages. Here goes. 1 in 5 men could suffer from fertility problems, and scientists have warned that it's just going to get worse. There's a crisis brewing, but it has nothing to do with the economic deficit or the current political uncertainty. Scientists are warning that rising levels of male infertility have become so perilous that it is a serious public health issue, and some go even further. Professor Niels Sakebak of the University of Copenhagen describes the issue as, quote, as important as global warming. Last week, one science writer even suggested in starkly terrifying terms that if scientists from Mars were to study the male reproductive system, they would possibly conclude that man was destined for rapid extinction. And if it continues, this trend could indicate men are on a path to becoming completely infertile within a few generations. Reports claim that as many as 1 in 5 healthy young men between the ages of 18 and 25 produce abnormal sperm counts. Only 5 to 15% of their sperm is good enough to be classed as normal under World Health Organization rules, proving that infertility is not just a female problem. Indeed, among those experiencing difficulty with conception, a male fertility problem is considered important in about 40% of couples. Factors such as women eating a lot of beef during pregnancy, which means they have consumed a diet rich in polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that are potentially damaging chemicals, to the issue of obesity during pregnancy and a woman's exposure to smoke, pesticides, traffic fumes, plastics, and even soybeans, are all thought to have a bearing on a male fetus's future fertility. Now, this article just stood right out to me because only a few days earlier, I had read another article from Salem News, published right here in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon, and this was written by April Scott, a former copywriter and online editor for KATU News. She writes, Today, Salem News reports that a joint experiment by Russia's National Association for Gene Security and the Institute of Ecological and Evolutional Problems has revealed that hamsters fed genetically modified foods produce grandchildren that are unable to produce fourth-generation offspring. Scientist Alexei Surov described the experiment, in which they monitored the behavior, weight gain, and birth rate of several groups of hamsters. Upon birth of the second generation, they noted slower rates of growth and sexual maturity. The next generation was unable to produce. This article then goes on to describe other health effects of GMO foods brought to light in the first lab study on the matter conducted at UC Berkeley in 1996, which showed, quote, stunted growth, impaired immune systems, bleeding stomachs, abnormal and potentially cancerous cell growth in the intestines, impaired blood cell development, misshaped cell structures in the liver, pancreas, and testicles, altered gene expression and cell metabolism, liver and kidney lesions, partially atrophied livers, inflamed kidneys, less developed organs, reduced digestive enzymes, high blood sugar, inflamed lung tissue, increased death rates, and higher offspring mortality as well. But this was just a study of vegetables grown from Monsanto's Roundup Ready seeds. Monsanto is a gigantic international agriculture firm that now produces over 90% of the seeds grown on farms for food in America, and they dominate the world as well. The reason why they are so large is because they built their company through the marketing of the world's most successful pesticide, Roundup, and now they've taken over the seed market with their patented GMO seeds that are created to resist this pesticide so that the pests die, but the plant doesn't. Unfortunately, the negative health effects observed in the lab rats proves that this seeming advantage comes at too heavy a price. But if that wasn't bad enough, Monsanto is now making seeds that have been modified so that they only produce fruit once, so that the seeds of that plant won't grow another plant, so that there's no generation, no propagation, no reproduction. This is to enforce their copyright on the seeds, which by law prohibits farmers from using the seeds of the plants they grow with Monsanto GMO seeds, thus forcing them to make a new purchase from Monsanto every year. So although the Roundup-resistant crops, and indeed the Roundup pesticide itself, now used more liberally than ever before, were already having a negative impact on health, including fertility, this new development has brought it to a new level of devastation. As the Russian rat studies discussed in the Salem News article prove, and as the human fertility studies at the University of Copenhagen discussed in the Daily Mail article prove, we humans, by eating this stuff, are now having our genes altered so that we cannot propagate. You know, it's funny to me, but if you think about it, for the first time in history, most of us go about our lives behaving as though there is no future. Not that there isn't a tomorrow for us, but I mean for future generations. Most of us believe that our children and grandchildren are basically doomed, for a variety of reasons, and that causes us to be short-sighted, concerned only with short-term gain, or short-term maintenance of the status quo. I think that this is a major factor in how we set our priorities, and why we tolerate things that damage our health, environment, civil liberties, economic security, and quality of life. People often make remarks about how the world is going to hell. I've heard several of the elderly people I know express relief that they're going to be dead soon, so that they won't have to live through the future that they've left for their children and grandchildren. And I think most of them sense, intrinsically, that those grandchildren's children won't be having children. Somewhere, subconsciously, they've made peace with that, accepted it, forgiven themselves for any role they might have had in it. We all know and have accepted on some level that our economic system is based on borrowing money from private banks, and primarily pledging as collateral for these loans the slave labor of our descendants. The Social Security scheme primarily benefited one generation of Americans, the children of the generation that created it. In reality, it only benefited the banks that administrate it. But I mean, as far as the citizenry is concerned, only one, maybe two generations of Americans will have drawn Social Security checks by the time it collapses, but will be paying the price for it for generations to come, if there are in fact any generations to come. But most people have known for decades now that the system was unsustainable, and that it was going to blow up before their children ever got to enjoy the supposed benefits of it. But American seniors, by far the largest and most powerful voting bloc, and the holders of the largest amount of wealth, kept voting to retain the system, because they wanted to get their piece of it. They didn't really care what happened to their descendants, And I believe it's because, in the back of their minds, they'd already written their children off as having no future anyway. But nobody wants to admit that they think that, or why they think that. There's quite a number of different belief systems popular today, which teach humans to believe that the end is near. There are the various apocalyptic end-time cults of the Christian and Shiite Muslim variety, along with those who are into the Mayan calendar, or who think that the planet Nibiru is going to come around and cause a pole shift, and or that the Anunnaki aliens are going to come back and either kill or enslave us. There are those with more, quote, scientific apocalypse theories who believe in global warming and overpopulation and things like that. And of course there are all sorts of things beyond our control that could happen to kill us all, like asteroids or comets or giant sun flares. And we know there have been pole shifts in the past, but it's uncertain what caused them. These are all things that are not really worth worrying about, because if they happen, there's really nothing you can do about it. But why is it that we feel the compulsion to believe in these things? And why do we behave as though we have no future? I think it's because of an underlying reality that few of us are willing to admit to ourselves. I think it has to do with the weaponized food that we're eating, and other artificial environmental contaminants that seem designed to sterilize, lobotomize, and kill us. I've already discussed the problems with genetically modified crops. That's corn and soybeans, etc., which are found in almost everything we eat. Then you've got GMO meat and dairy. They're engineering cows and chickens to produce more meat, more milk, bigger eggs, etc. And the chickens have breasts so big now that they can't stand up. And the cows are getting infections in their mammary glands, so now there's a high index of pus in the milk that we drink. And one of the things that comes to my mind is that people have been eating this stuff for many years now. And the obesity epidemic is so huge now, it makes me wonder if eating meat from cows and chickens, with genes that have been changed to give them abnormally large breasts and abdomens, isn't in fact having the same effect on us. Then there are the ingredients in processed foods, the worst of which I think are aspartame and high fructose corn syrup. These are both artificial sweeteners. Aspartame is made up from the waste of genetically modified E. coli bacteria and causes all sorts of health problems, including Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, birth defects, and brain tumors. It's found in diet soda and other low-fat, low-calorie desserts. High fructose corn syrup is used almost universally now in place of sugar in soda and juice. And it's known to have high levels of mercury in it because of the manufacturing process. It also causes obesity much more rapidly than regular sugar. Now, there seems to be a battle going on between the corporations that produce weaponized food and anyone who tries to offer an alternative. These companies are using their influence on government to make it almost impossible for people to avoid using their products. They basically want to prevent people from being self-sufficient and making their own food choices. So there are laws in places throughout the country right now against selling raw milk, selling homegrown vegetables, or even having a home garden at all. Now there's a social Darwinist self-regulating caste system that's being created here, where the lower classes are being slowly weeded out of the population over 2 or 3 generations because they can't afford organic food. They don't have the ability to go to the places where it's sold, and they aren't educated about why they should. The upper classes have a much better chance of making it, but they are by no means safe. It's very difficult and time-consuming to avoid weaponized food, and you can almost never be certain that your food supply is pure. But let's face it, because of the economic collapse, governments and the banks that own them are fleecing Americans like never before, to the point of total devastation. They have already begun the process of seizing pension funds. Anyone with an income is going to be taxed into poverty. Those with no income will be criminalized and turned into slave labor in prison camps. It's already happening. Within a couple of years, there will be no middle class, no upper middle class, and no nouveau riche. There will be only the 1% at the top, the billionaires from old world money families, and the rest of us. The yuppies of today won't be able to buy kettle chips and Newman's Own in a couple of years. They'll be standing in a bread line, taking whatever they can get. And what they're going to get is a fresh, steaming hot cup full of death. That's right, you see, the consequences of being apathetic and ignorant and uninvolved and selling your species into slavery for petty, short-term gain is coming not in some faraway, distant future in Never Never Land that only your kids will have to experience. No, it's coming to you, right now. A couple of weeks ago, I finally saw the movie 2012 that came out in 2009 about a pole shift that wipes out most life on Earth. And in the plot for this movie, the governments of the world knew that this was coming, and so they told no one except their own cronies and buddies. And they planned in advance a way to save themselves and their friends by using what they called arks, referring to Noah's Ark. They used the same concept, and even the same term, ark, in the movie Deep Impact from 1998, about a comet hitting the Earth. In Deep Impact, the arks were subterranean cities. In 2012, they were submarines. And in both movies, the main characters somehow managed to be among the chosen few to survive the catastrophe. The thing is that there are already such plans in place in reality. It's called continuity of government, and there really are underground facilities built in case of a disaster, whether natural or man-made, in which an alternative government and society, populated only by those they deem worthy, will be allowed to flourish while the rest of us die. And guess what? You don't have a ticket on board the Ark. You are going down with the rest of us unless you stand up. We'll be back after these messages with my interview with James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. Hello, we're back on The Invisible Hand. I'm Tracy Twyman. And now to our guest today. James Evan Pilato is the editor of several websites, including MediaMonarchy.com, FoodWorldOrder.com, and CyberSpaceWar.com. He also has a podcast called Media Monarchy, and contributes regularly to the videos put out by CorbettReport.com. Here's Mr. Pilato. So James, go ahead and tell us about what you do. I know you have various websites, and you have at least one podcast I know, and you have a radio show. Go ahead and tell me all about it.
all those various things. It all started probably 4 or 5 years ago. I started Media Monarchy as just a news blog. And when I moved to Portland, I got in touch and got hooked up with the Portland Radio Authority, which is praradio.org. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing the live show out of there for almost 4 years. And it's basically, I use the website kind of as the script for the show. So the things that I've posted to the site throughout the week, that's then what I go over on Fridays. And about just over a year ago, I believe it was February 2009, I started a site called foodworldorder.com to just focus on all the sort of food and health issues that, became obvious were going to become more and more important. And then I even, a few months after that, started cyberspacewar.com just to follow all the hack attacks and threats of, internet censorship, technology, space, all of those kind of stories. That's what's tough. I think, you're probably in the same boat like a lot of us, where you're a one-man show, but you want to do so many different things. You want to cover so many different topics.
Right.
And last night when we were even just kind of chatting, doing kind of a preset for this, I sent you the link of those videos that I do with James Corbett of CorbettReport.com. We do a weekly 10-minute YouTube video series called The New World Next Week. And, and that's just been another great way to kind of get the information out. For me, the videos are definitely something, that I can send my parents, literally. Because I know they're never going to listen to a weekly 2-hour podcast.
Sure.
But when you put it into kind of a 10-minute, bite-sized form, we basically try and cover 3 stories, each week and give the documentation. And it's kind of it's not scripted necessarily, but again, I think it's just a more succinct way to try and hit those folks again who, like parents or other relatives or friends who, aren't going to listen to a 2-hour show.
Right. So the perspective you're coming from with Media Monarchy, I mean, I know that the stuff you cover is sort of New World Order related stuff, for lack of a better term, things about government intrusion in our lives and the consolidation of government globally, and civil liberties issues and things of that nature. Now, Media Monarchy, what does that mean? Is that a reference to the sort of corporate control of media?
I think it ultimately worked out to be that. Honestly, the name was created beforehand back east, which is where, my girlfriend and I, who lived together here in Portland for 5 years, she and I met in West Virginia, where we're from, at college. And we were both, communication majors and theater minors. And I played in a band. And we were always just thinking of and writing down cool names. that could either be used for, for band names or album names or project titles.
Sure.
Media monarchy was something actually that my girlfriend came up with that, I had scribbled down in the list of other, cool names.
Uh-huh.
So when I first started the blog, I named it that, and it initially wasn't going to be a news and anti-New World Order website. I think when I started it, I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do with it. I was probably going to do something, media related, more about maybe music and film. And I was the program director at my community radio station.
Uh-huh.
So I was kind of the music guy. So that kind of made more sense. But basically the long and short of it, when I moved to Portland and didn't have a job, didn't really have any friends, it kind of grew into the news blog, that it's turned into at this point. Because basically for me, it was 9/11 that got me into this kind of research.
Mm-hmm.
It was my own natural question, probably 6-8 months after 9/11, if that long, where just always being a media junkie, and to this day, I love film and music and all of that. My own natural question was, hey, what's the video look like of the plane hitting the Pentagon?
Uh-huh.
So we had seen the towers a million times, and it was just, oh yeah, what's that one look like? And all you had to do at that point was search that to discover, oh, we don't know what that looks like. Because this was, they hadn't even put out the few little frames yet that still, of course, showed nothing.
Right.
So meanwhile, while I was the radio programmer and played in a band and was doing sound design for theater, meanwhile, on my own, I was kind of awakening to all of this and starting to research 9/11, which, of course, once you start looking into 9/11, then you're going to look into Oklahoma City, and then you're going to look into JFK, and then you're going to look into all these other events, that are essentially false flag events used to escalate the agenda. So as we can see right now, regardless of which, front man they put up for whichever, the two main parties, it somehow seems that things don't really change and the agenda keeps going forward. So now, we're still almost 9 years into the Afghanistan war, blamed on, 9/11 is the blank check that's let that happen.
Mm-hmm.
The war is still going on. The spying's still going on. All these things still go on, and yet people somehow every 4 or 8 years vote those bums out and get some other bums in, and one side goes to sleep, and then the other side kind of gets, they get energized.
Yeah, so for people who don't, haven't really looked into 9/11 or any of these other issues, they might not understand. But the fact is that 9/11 is just one portal you could take. When you start looking at major events in modern history, and you sort of peel back the layers and discover some of the hidden causes for things that happened, it takes you into this whole world where, okay, say for instance with 9/11, once you discover that it looks like there's some sort of setup involved, that you're not being told the whole story, and maybe, elements of the government were intentionally involved in it, well, then you have to ask, why would that be? Why would anyone really want to kill 3,000 Americans? What possible agenda would be that important? And so then you start learning about geopolitics and monetary policy and the manipulation of various commodities for global control. Then you discover basically that there's this oligarchy, essentially, that is really behind the scenes of all of the major events in the world right now. And it's not necessarily one group of people, but it's a class of people that we're not involved in, and it's all happening in a level that we have no way of influencing, really. And so I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm just trying to say.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's the thing. I think while I was researching it, on my own, meanwhile, like I said, kind of still being the music guy, it was something I kind of kept to myself, because it was something I was just kind of discovering, and I didn't want to be someone to just start flying off the handle and talking about all this stuff. And you'll find, like we were saying, that you'll find a lot of the same players throughout the years that, unfortunately, how long have we been dealing with folks like Henry Kissinger and Brzezinski and these guys that, again, we see, the frontman may change, but somehow you find these, the same kind of cast of characters still behind, whichever team is supposedly winning at the moment.
I know, yeah. It's frightening when you start looking into a modern-day event, and then you find the same people behind that were seemingly involved in the Kennedy assassination and things like that. And then you feel like a nut at a certain point. You're just like, I can't even talk about this because everyone will think I'm crazy. But reality is weirder than fiction. I mean, here's the thing I've noticed is that when I started this sort of research, I didn't get head over heels into it because a lot of the information was coming from websites and books by self-published authors and allegedly declassified government documents that I didn't have the means to be able to verify whether or not this was a legitimate document or not. But in the past 10 years, it's all come out of the closet, so that all you have to do is go to the Times of London and the Guardian and the New York Times and all of these mainstream papers. Just go there every day, and you're going to find information that's verifying this point of view that basically there is an oligarchy trying to control the world, trying to consolidate power, and it's kind of like basically a global corporation that's forming, a privately owned corporation that wants to they feel like they own us all, that we are their slaves, and they want to control every single aspect of our lives.
And every day, yes, we can read all those things in the mainstream papers. They won't come out, they don't come out necessarily and say, yes, there's a handful of families and oligarchs who pretty much run the world, but they they'll put things out that, again, what I think amateur, researchers and citizen journalists then go do the work and kind of put it together in the context and subtext that the mainstream media doesn't provide. And I find sites like historycommons.org, which originally started just kind of hosting what they called the complete 9/11 timeline. And what they do is just lay out the timeline, and it's all kind of searchable, indexed. If you're reading an entry and you see a name, hit that name, and it'll take you to all of their entries. But they just cite and source the main kind of central original documents.
Right.
So whether that's a New York Times report or some congressional report. And just the same, that I was saying about the mainstream media, historycommons.org doesn't lay it out and say, Dick Cheney did it, or, any of these kind of specific things. They just kind of lay it out and say, well, here's all the documentation that's all publicly available. You can kind of make up your own mind and do your own research.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what you have to do. I mean, everyone who's listening, I'm sorry to say, but you can't just, absorb news the way you absorb your favorite TV show. You've got, if you want to know what's going on, you've got to basically spend a couple hours online each day at least, reading original documents, going to the source of the material, and making your own decision. And again, I think through the years, that I said that 9/11 was the event that got me into this area. And of course, my question was, let's see the video of the plane hitting the Pentagon. Now, nearly 9 years out, over the last half of that time, it seemed as though 9/11 research was going into this area. And even when, people say 9/11 truth, to a lot of folks, that means, oh yeah, you think the buildings were blown up. Right.
That's the end all be all of any of the questions about 9/11. And for me, through the years, seeing that, it's like, wow, this seems to be becoming the main topic of 9/11. So anytime they would, the talking heads would have anybody on, that's all they would ever want to talk about. And for me, it's like, oh, as long as they can keep the discussion in this realm of what are essentially going to have to be speculative things.
Right.
Because all that stuff's gone.
We're going to take a break now. We'll be back with more from James Evan Pilato right after this. Welcome back to The Invisible Hand. And now here's more from our guest, James Evan Pilato. Okay, so let's get into food world order.
Absolutely.
Just taking a glance at it, I assume that your intention in doing this is really to talk about the corporate food monopoly that's forming in the United States and globally that is attempting to take over the entire production of food from seed to packaging and actually prevent regular people from being able to produce their own food. They're trying to wipe out small farmers and farmers markets and even people with their little gardens at home, and trying to force everyone to consume food that results from genetically modified animals and vegetables.
Well, and that's that's pretty much the good basic rundown on it. And again, just even briefly, the title that I got, which I'm proud of. I like it. I find much like Media Monarchy, it's fairly descriptive and original sounding. But it was something that in doing the live Media Monarchy radio show, I think it was a phrase that I said or that I came up with live on the air. And I know when I got home that day from the show, it was like, Food World Order. I like that. And in I think literally that afternoon registered the domain name and then started the separate blog. For me, it's been something, that is thanks in no small part to my girlfriend. I am not, and have never really been the picture of model health. I'm not horrible. I couldn't tell you the last time I've had fast food or anything like that. But, I eat microwave pizzas and I smoke cigarettes and drink beer and drink a lot of coffee and things like that. But since I've lived in Portland, I work for basically a small chain of not entirely organic, but organic local grocery stores. And I don't typically mention the name just because in a way where it's like I don't want them to have to be associated with me of me running around saying, hey, I work for da da da.
Right.
But it's if you're from this area, I can say, well, I work for the friendliest store in town, and you pretty much know what I'm talking about. And we compete with the Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and some of those other kind of stores. But we're again, independently owned. There's only 10, I think, locations only in Oregon, and as far as the mission statement goes, they're only going to ever be in Oregon. But working at a place like that, and being surrounded by local food, organic food, small farmers and small businesses, being surrounded by that, really started to have an effect on me. And again, my girlfriend being, much more interested and excited about food. We also get something called Organics to You here in town, which is a service that, sort of as often as you may need it, I guess, depending on how big your family may be, you get a box of local in-season organic food. And we actually just got our box yesterday. And it's things like that that make me really excited in a way about living in a city like Portland. Because again, like I said, I'm from small town West Virginia, which meant you're going to shop at Walmart or Kroger. And I think even the one little independent grocery store that used to be in town is, of course, I don't think even there anymore. But living in a city where you have the opportunity, and I think Portland is kind of special in that way, that it's not like Manhattan or Chicago or LA, that hopefully as things seem to fall apart, at least economically, things are going to have to come back to a more community-based level. And, most of the folks say, whether that's, Food Inc. or Michael Pollan and Omnivore's Dilemma or Eric Schlosser and Fast Food Nation, a lot of those guys will all even say that, maybe even more important than eating organic is eating and buying local to make sure that can be built up. So it's basically something that since I've lived here and work at the store and have tried to become more conscious, like I said, I'll be the first to tell you I'm not the picture of health. And if anything, and probably much more so than Media Monarchy, foodworldorder.com is more even an education for myself. Whereas, with something like Media Monarchy, yes, I'm fairly well versed in, 9/11 or JFK and all the other topics that we go over. But Food World Order has really kind of been, educational for me to kind of make myself become more, excited and involved and just partaking of real local food.
Right. I mean, I think that I can sort of relate to what you're saying about, that you're not the picture of perfect health. And I understand feeling almost guilty about talking about this when you're no real example to anyone. But the thing is, I think that the habits, the normal human habits that most people have that might have a negative effect on your health, people have had those for a long time. And not only that, but things like just, eating meat and cheese, having a hamburger or something is not something that should be abnormal or bad for your health. I think as time has gone on, those things have become detrimental to your health because of the type of food we're eating, and not just, it's like, here's my point. It's just, we are all bombarded with all sorts of messages. On the one hand, you get, the McDonald's ad on TV telling you to buy their hamburger. And then on the other hand, you've got, messages from nonprofit foundations and even messages you get at school and things like that, making you feel guilty about your lifestyle and that, you're killing yourself, you're killing your children with the food you're giving them. And, I think we all sort of walk around with this feeling that there's something wrong with us because of the way we live, the fact that we eat food and and drink beverages. We all just feel bad about that. And it's like, no, you shouldn't have to feel bad about eating normal food. The problem is that the normal food is no longer normal. Exactly. And, so go ahead and just define organic for us a little bit. What does something have to be in order to be organic?
Well, I think that, that gets into some of the USDA, labeling and things, which, that opens up that whole other world of like, oh, yeah, do I trust the FDA and USDA? But it basically means, food that hasn't been grown using, chemical pesticides, and it has not been genetically modified. So when you're looking at products, what you want to see is there's a specific logo that it'll have on there that is the USDA, certified organic logo. Now, the thing that's actually on the top of foodworldorder.com as we speak right now is an article from Alternet saying Newman's Own exploiting organic labeling loophole, where basically, and of course they're not the only one, I think it's just probably more disappointing that a company like Newman's Own would be doing this, right, putting the word organic into your title. So again, kind of misdirecting and tricking people and using these words, but then when you look for that specific, label, it may not be there. So you name your company, Newman's Own Organics, and people think that it's organic. Mm-hmm. It may have, organic ingredients. And again, it's probably a whole lot better than, going through McDonald's. That's easy to say. But I think what we've seen, and as I think, again, the oligarchs have seen people's interest in saying, hey, I think our food and water might be poison. I'm going to take, more of an active role in figuring out what we're eating and, becoming more proactive. That any time, and again, whether this is in politics or any kind of situation, when they see a movement away from, the herd, for lack of a better term, they're ready in a way for, if as soon as you want to get outside the box, they've got another box that you're going to step into. So even, unfortunately, a lot of the products, at the store that, again, better than average, a lot of those, as you start to look at the labels or do a little bit of research, you'll see it's like, oh, that company, Santa Cruz or Knudsen, they got bought by Smuckers, or a lot of that kind of situation. So again, they'll keep the logo and they'll keep the label the same. But if you look at the fine print, you'll see it's like, this is owned by Kraft, or you're owned by Procter & Gamble, or the same kind of big multinational corporations. Mm-hmm. That's something, and you mentioned something about a beer, which that's something, again, I think that's kind of great about Portland. I love being able to buy beer that's made here. Right. That coming from small town West Virginia, as the years have gone by, definitely a lot more smaller craft breweries have popped up. But again, you're going to walk into the corner store, you're looking at Budweiser.
You said people are turning to organics because they're thinking that the regular food in the supermarket is killing them, and I think that you're right. I think it started off, a lot of it with just had a certain cachet to it. It was kind of attractive to yuppies to make them look like they're eating a finer, a higher, more highbrow level of food than the other people. But as people discover what's actually going on in food production, they realize that it literally is killing and sterilizing you. And I'm sure you know all about this, so go ahead and tell us a little bit about, let's first talk about genetically modified fruit, vegetables, and grain. Most of these seeds being controlled by a corporation called Monsanto. And from what I know, they've patented their genetically modified seeds, so they actually force the farmers who grow plants with these seeds to buy the seeds new every year. It's illegal for them to save some of the seeds for planting the next year or to harvest seeds from the actual crops to plant next year. And then Monsanto actually goes around entrapping farmers into breaking these rules, and then they sue them for millions of dollars. So there's that evil aspect to this corporation where they're actually trying to push all of these small farmers out of the market and take over. And
well,
so
and it's not.
Go ahead.
And it's not even the fact that that they won't let you grow hang on to the seeds and grow them again. They've been engineered to where they won't grow again.
Right.
They'll only work once, so you have to go back to them that next year, which, for me, again, something going fundamentally against the way humans have lived and farmed and eaten on Earth for millennia has now been subsumed into this corporate behemoth, which, yeah, like you said, I think one of the more famous cases is some of these seeds from someone else's farm, or I think it was maybe even a truck driving by, blew into a farmer's land, and he was sued and I think ultimately lost. Monsanto saying, "Oh, well, you stole our seeds."
Right.
It's like, no, your poison seeds blew into my field, and then I couldn't do anything about it.
Well, that's what makes copywriting a seed so ridiculous, because you can't control what happens in nature and how plants propagate and reproduce,
And it's and again, these are the kind of things that make you hold your head and just kind of in a way you almost have to be in awe at the kind of evil genius of a lot of it. But these are the things I think that people have started to discover. And yes, it did start out with more of just kind of a trendy thing. And I can still see a lot of, different trends within health food, that people will get into. And suddenly, everybody's into coconut water and we can't keep enough coconut water on the shelf. And I'm not saying these things are bad, but there's definitely the cachet of, hey, this is, the hot new thing.
But to get back into the seeds being genetically modified so that they can't reproduce, there's that going on. They're also this is how they started GMOing, is that Monsanto produces Roundup, which is the pesticide that almost everyone uses, and they discovered a way to genetically modify the seeds so that the plant will be resistant to Roundup, so you can dump tons of pesticide onto the plants without worrying that the plants are going to die.
Mm-hmm.
But the effect that both the pesticide resistance, and the genetic modification to make it so that they can't reproduce, so that the seeds can't grow after the second generation. The effect that all of that seems to be having is creating infertility in the population. And I know I sent you an article last night from the Daily Mail.
Oh, yeah.
Where it said scientists are confirming, they're discovering that basically 1 out of 5 men in Britain is infertile, and it could be more than that. That's just what they've discovered so far. And they're projecting, if this trend continues, we could see the human race die out in a few generations. And what they talked about in the article, some of the things that could be causing that: environmental toxins for one thing, and also they just briefly mentioned food supply. They really didn't describe what about the food supply is the problem. But I know that about 2 weeks ago, I also read another article that was about studies they were doing with lab rats and GMO foods, and they've discovered that these rats cannot reproduce after the 4th generation. So these sterilizing effects that these foods are having don't necessarily show up right away. You'll have a lower sperm count if you eat it, and then your children will have a lower sperm count, and then their children will have a lower sperm count, and then there won't be any other children after that.
And that's, and these things start to, they conjure up, which, and that's a whole other field of conversation. A lot of the media that kind of shows, things like Children of Men. It's like, oh, in the future when everyone's sterile, setting out these ideas that, again, the kind of planting the seed, if you will, But that's the thing. It's like we have no idea what's really going to come down in a few generations from doing all of this, genetic engineering and cross-species hybrids, making spider goats and all of these, things that, most folks would say it's like, oh, that's a crime against nature. And this seed, they're building, I think what speaks to a lot of this is the seed vault that, again, isn't really a secret. A lot of folks know about it, but I think a lot of folks don't really think too much about why it's there and who's funding it.
Yes.
And, in the icy, rocky mountains in Norway, and it's, I think, referred to as the Doomsday Seed Vault. But when you have folks like Bill Gates, who, when you look at all the things he's involved in, whether that's, giving vaccines to, third world populations or even giving vaccines to, American populations, his father was on the board of directors of Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood, of course, being founded by a racist eugenicist, referred to black people as weeds, and we have to co-opt, the leaders of the black movement so they won't know that we want to kill all of them.
Yeah.
Planned Parenthood today, of course, being held in high esteem by most of, well-meaning progressive Democrat types. That's unfortunately, I think, when you look at a lot of these stories that concern any kind of health issue, that it comes down to, I think, eugenics. And it's these, families throughout, the last several generations. And they talk about it and they write about it. We know H.G. Wells is famous for The Time Machine and books like that, but he also wrote nonfiction books called The Open Conspiracy and The New World Order. And a lot of these guys, whether that's, Julian Huxley or even Galton and Darwin, a lot of these guys, they tried to even inbreed with each other, thinking, well, we're of such a higher race so that if we all just breed with each other, within a few generations, we'll have, super genius class. It, of course, turned out the exact opposite, and they abandoned it after, I think, 1 or 2 generations. But when you look at a lot of these events, I think you end up finding the fingerprints of eugenics. The idea, basically, that we may not have to blow you away with guns and missiles, but we can make it to where you destroy yourself and you're not even able to breed later, leaving, of course, the world for all these folks who, again, think they're our masters.
Yeah. I think that this is where, when people hear us talking about this stuff, they think we've gone totally mad. But because we're talking about not just a corporate conspiracy to control a market and make more money, but there's a much more sinister agenda here. Because you think, okay, if they want to have a monopoly on the food production so they can make more money, why would they want to, kill the hen that lays the golden eggs?
Yeah.
Right. Well, because the end game is not for you to be around. I mean, the fact is that the world can function with a lot fewer people than is on it right now. If you were to be able to wipe out a large percentage of the population and you were still alive, things would be okay, or at least you could conceive of a world like that with a lot fewer people. You don't need this many people to run factories, and you could have a world with, say, 500,000 people on it, which has been talked about in the minutes of elite think tanks that they talk about.
And Bill Gates talks about it all the time. Ted Turner talks about it all the time. A lot of our sort of, again, our progressive leaders, they'll always talk about, population.
You mentioned Bill Gates' involvements in vaccines, and also, of course, his obsession with population control. And yes, his father was involved in promoting abortion, and he himself. There's a clinic right in Portland called Outside In that provides family planning services to people who are basically homeless, street kids and people like that. And he's not running it, but he's the largest contributor to it. And it shows that this person is really obsessed with controlling population. And he himself said it was almost a slip-up, I think. I don't think he meant to say this, but he was giving some sort of lecture about all the different scientific projects that he's donating money to. And one of them was airborne vaccines, or vaccines that would be activated by human sweat, that you could sort of surreptitiously dose the population with without their consent.
He's talked about putting vaccines in mosquitoes.
And then he says that these vaccines will reduce the population, and he doesn't explain how that would work. I mean, if a vaccine is supposed to prevent you from getting a disease, shouldn't it have the opposite effect of saving people's lives? But no, we suspect that there's some sort of sterilizing agent in some of these vaccines, and that's the real motivation for wanting us all to take vaccines.
Mm-hmm. And I think, to even go back to talking about 9/11, it's like, well, why would they do that? Why would they kill 3,000 people? When you look at the history of, not just the United States, but of Britain and India and a lot of other countries, you'll sometimes see things, quietly come out in the news. It's like, oh, yeah, Britain apologized for sterilizing all those people back a couple decades ago.
Right.
That they've done this throughout, at least throughout the last century. So you can see their motives, and you can see their fingerprints, and you can see their trail, that all of these things can't be an accident. I can't subscribe to the sort of coincidence theory of history that, oh yeah, all these things they just all a big accident and everything just kind of bumbles along. But that, you would ask, well, why would they want to kill their customers? We're the ones who give them their money. All we have to do is look at the financial page, and again, these things kind of leak out, but you have to, do the work to see the context and the subtext. It's like they make the money. They print the money. They create the zeros and ones.
Right.
And you said the term end game. That's what it feels like we're kind of moving towards. Now, do I believe stormtroopers will be marching down the streets tomorrow? Probably not. I think it's in a slow, incremental move.
You don't need stormtroopers if everyone's cooperating, if everyone's eating the food that's slowly killing them and sterilizing. What's the point in pointing a gun at their face? They're already shooting themselves.
Mm-hmm. And it'll be a lot simpler, and in a way it almost sort of, it gives them an out to say, well, we didn't kill you. You just, you're just a poor person with bad health.
Well, okay, you bring up, poor people. Yes, that's who's dying, right? I mean, this is a Malthusian process here where...
Well, and even let's even say real quick that Malthusian is a term for a guy named Thomas Malthus, and this is centuries ago, who was basically saying, there will be a food collapse because of population, and ultimately saying, well, that'll be a good thing because the population's too large anyway, and there's too many of these, dirty poor people.
But the thing is, who's the dirty poor people? It's like, I don't know anyone who doesn't make fun of people of lower class than them. Everyone does that. Everyone thinks that the other people are lower class and dirty and ugly and smelly, and everyone makes fun of those other people. But you don't realize that there's people who make fun of you that are consider themselves to be a much higher class than you. They consider you to be a weed. And it's the thing, I'm friends with a lot of different people that are into the occult, and some of them are members of different secret societies and things like that. And, a lot of them are just really in denial about this stuff because it's actually in a lot of the... the philosophy behind a lot of these occult groups includes this idea, this dream, that someday the world is going to be perfected and all of the unclean people are going to be removed from the population, and then only the chosen few, which of course they always believe will include themselves, is going to rule. And I don't think anyone really thinks about the larger picture and the fact that, if the world is going to be cleansed by contaminated food and water, what makes you really think that you're going to be able to avoid that throughout your life? I mean, if I want to protect myself from this, first of all, I've got to spend several $100s more per month on food. I've got to buy some multi-$100 water filtration system.
No, and that's the thing. We do have a nice Berkey water filter, and we do try and get organic food. But again, there's kind of no escape. But I think what you were talking about, these different groups, and I can kind of think of that because I had a Christian upbringing, Southern Baptist, that, that's the same thing. That there's a future coming on and you're going to be included.
You're in the rapture.
And you're going to be in the rapture, or you're going to be in the club, or whether that's, whatever kind of group. It's like they tell those members that, if you're on our team, there's a place for you in the future, whether that's in some, magical heaven or some other place or some kind of, wonderful utopia, that again, they always kind of tell folks that you're going to be in that club. But, with all of those things, it's like, do you really think that you're part of the club? It's like, oh, I vote Republican. It's like, oh, wow, you must be rich. It's like George Bush, and those guys, they hate you.
Right.
They just want your money and your votes to be able to continue the agenda.
Yeah, you're not special because you're in the OTO and you have a tattoo of some symbol that Aleister Crowley came up with. It's not. What number of people are actually going to be in this chosen few? Who knows? And then probably those people are fighting and plotting amongst themselves too.
Absolutely.
That, as soon as we get it down to 500,000, I'm going to kill all of the DuPonts or the Harrimans or whatever.
I know. I wonder sometimes. I tend to think of what kind of we're up against in a way is what I refer to on the show as sort of multi-generational serial killers.
Yes.
Yes, there are families and bloodlines, and sometimes, they're referred to as the Illuminati. And yes, they have massive amounts of power. Do I necessarily think they pull every string and make every little single thing happen? Probably not. Again, to kind of, I guess, go against what I said a few minutes ago about saying, I can't subscribe to the coincidence theories. But, again, I don't think every little single word and moment is scripted. But you basically have gangster families who will act like, they're kind of against each other. And occasionally they even have to bump each other off sometimes. But ultimately, I think they know that as long as we can keep our game going, we won't do anything that will jeopardize, the game board or the gangster gangland. So it may look like they kind of battle against each other, but ultimately, and whether you're talking about corporations, different food corporations or different media corporations, it's like, yeah, we may battle out to have the number one movie every the weekend, but we're not going to do anything to ultimately dump the game board off the table.
So there's multiple levels to this global control, because people first they think about what their government's doing to them, but really your government is owned by corporations, and then in reality, you've got to think about the fact that the corporations are controlled by individuals who 9 times out of 10 end up being from a family that has been in a powerful position for multiple generations. So, it's not like we're trying to start a witch hunt here or single out certain gene pools as being the enemy, but you've got to think that if you've got a conspiracy to reduce the population that's been going on for multiple generations, then it's not just greedy corporations. There are individuals behind this that have a long-term goal.
Mm-hmm. And you even said, DuPonts, or whether that's the Astors or any of these other, Rothschild, Rockefeller, these are definitely names to include in that list. But if you have that last name, are you evil and you're tinting your fingers and maybe not necessarily. But again, a lot of these things, these people have names and addresses. I think there were just articles over the weekend of people going to some of the banksters' houses and protesting.
Yes. Well, at this point, it's like it's full-on war. We are towards the end game, as you described. We're at the point where they're almost taking off the mask and saying, yes, we're killing you. What are you going to do about it? Mm-hmm. And so people are, it's just like when you finally realize that someone's pointing a gun in your face, you really have no choice but to try to kill them or run away. You got to do something.
Fight or flight.
So I think that's the position that people are finally in now, and that's why they're finally starting to respond. But honestly, I don't know. I don't know whether to be optimistic or not. I mean, what do you think?
I have no idea. I think depending on which time you ask me, I may either say, absolutely things are changing. I think people are discovering what's going on. You have people protesting the banks. You have people kind of trying to take things, more into their own hands and into their community's hands. But if you ask me the next day, I'm going to say, oh, we're screwed. It's too far gone. People are discovering what's really going on, but they're still battling it out within the kind of dialectics that they create for us, whether that's the conservatives versus the liberals or the blacks versus the whites or all those kind of cultural things that keep us all fighting amongst each other. Again, meanwhile, the families and the serial killers and the organizations, they keep moving forward. And they'll throw us these little debates and we'll rip each other to shreds over abortion or immigration or gay marriage and those kind of things. But ultimately, I think these families, they don't care about immigration. They certainly don't care about abortion. And they just like to dangle the threat of taking it away to energize one party or the other. Mm-hmm. But to take it back to Food World Order, an article that I was tracking, or a story that I was tracking throughout the end of 2009, and the last update I have on it is from March 30th of this year. And again, this should kind of show you that, again, Hope and Change was just another, Madison Avenue advertising campaign. Obama appoints ex-pesticide lobbyist as agricultural trade negotiator. And it's not the first guy that Obama's appointed to, food and health boards that have backgrounds with, Monsanto and DuPont. Then again, it's like, that's not an accident.
Well, didn't Rumsfeld used to run Monsanto, and I believe he was actually had a hand in their promotion of aspartame and actually twisting arms with the FDA to get it approved.
I don't know that it's Monsanto, but yeah, he was involved in a different company, and maybe Monsanto does play into it later. But yeah, some folks have joked about Rumsfeld. It's like, man, he's like the devil at every sort of evil point. It's like, boom, there he is. There he is at aspartame. Boom, there he is at 9/11. Boom, there he is at the war. Yeah, aspartame, he basically was able to twist arms because, again, these guys have been around through administration after administration. They may recede into the background for 4 or 8 years, but that's just them going back to their corporation. And then when the time's right, they'll move back into some administration position. So to see Obama appointing, Michael Taylor, who's the head of a food safety group, and he's ex-Monsanto vice president, or one of the vice presidents. And this new guy is the guy I was just referencing. His name is Islam Siddiqui, an ex-pesticide lobbyist connected to DuPont and Dow and Monsanto, again, to mention some of the family names. Mm-hmm. And, Obama leaves on, Robert Gates as the head of the military. It's like that should have shown you right there that, this war wasn't going to change or end.
Well, it's just so creepy to think about the guy who, was at one time in charge of bombing Iraqis was also at one time in charge of putting a deadly contaminant in people's food, which just briefly, right, aspartame, the artificial sweetener used in all diet soda, basically is this feces of genetically modified E. coli bacteria that has the effect of all sorts of effects of creating Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's disease, brain tumors, birth defects. It
eats holes in your brain, I think.
Another thing I read was actually that some doctors will warn pregnant women not to drink it because it can cause your body to treat the fetus as though it was a foreign body and reject it. So, anyway, it's just obvious that, okay, the war is not just on the Iraqis, the war is on us, everyone.
Exactly. And that's something I do talk about a lot on Media Monarchy, that it's like, whichever it is, whatever the new thing is, whether that's we're going to target, illegals or we're looking for the terrorist, they always set it up and sell it as though it's for those other people. But ultimately, through the weeks and months and years, you discover and you see them wheel it around and realize that it was always meant for us and everybody. Mm-hmm. But I think, again, we talk about Monsanto and Dow and DuPont. We can also talk about, Coca-Cola. And you look at their history. It's like they did business with the Nazis. That's where Fanta comes from. Yes. Pepsi and United Fruit and these kind of, food companies that, of course, food generally just on its face is a more happy thing. Everybody likes food. Right. So, and these intelligence operations use food corporations kind of as a front to move into, third world countries to control resources. But, we could talk about a lot of these things for a long, long time. I think for me, a way to kind of encapsulate it and what I'm trying to do with Food World Order is that, am I going to be able to end the war in Iraq and Afghanistan? Probably not. Can I overthrow the banksters? Probably not, but a good point and a good easy way that we can affect change there is just take your money out of the banks from those banks. And that's, when ultimately, and again, a whole other story, when the FDIC and JP Morgan Chase colluded to basically have a controlled demolition of Washington Mutual, which was my bank at the time, when JP Morgan Chase took over Washington Mutual, I quit. It's like, you don't get my money. You don't get, to loan out $10 for every $1 I give you, and you maybe throw me a nickel every year and say, oh, look at your interest. It's just, that's something where we can actually have an effect. If we all took our money out of these banks, they would fall apart.
Well,
and
yeah,
it's the same thing I think with food is on a certain level, and hopefully this is only becoming more so. But again, we're kind of lucky being in a place like Portland, Oregon, that you can decide what goes down your gullet.
Okay, that's it for this edition of The Invisible Hand. I'd like to thank my guest, James Evan Pilato. Be sure to check out his websites, MediaMonarchy.com, CyberspaceWar.com, and FoodWorldOrder.com, as well as his contribution to the Corbett Report at CorbettReport.com. That's CORBETT report.com. I also want to thank our donors and our advertisers. Bye for now.